Hello there, fellow masters. Happy New Year, and welcome to a new video series that I'm going to be starting where I'm going to be discussing the 5 best servants in each class in Fate Grand Order, and obviously starting with the Saber class. A few things before we get started. Like I said, I'll be doing a video for each main class as well as the extra class, and then at the end I will also be doing a video discussing bronze servants, just so we cover all rarities. As we will be discussing the best servants, obviously most of these servants will be 4 and 5-star servants, but I'll be sure to mention a few 3-star servants at the very least in the honorable mentions if a 3-star servant doesn't make the top 5. In addition to this, this is merely my opinion. These who I think are the best servants and why. Just because I think this is the best servant of a class doesn't mean someone else might have a different opinion. That is fine. Perfectly okay. If you disagree with any of my picks, feel free to leave a comment below explaining why. And finally, just because I don't mention a servant doesn't mean that that servant is unusable or bad in any way, shape, or form. Every 5-star servant and nearly every 4-star servant is absolutely worth leveling and using. With that out of the way, I think it's time we get started with who I think are the 5 best Saber servants in Fate Grand Order. But first, I think it's best to discuss the Saber class as a class in general. Stat-wise, Saber's fairly strong offensive class. Uh, Typically, I believe they have the third highest average attack stat amongst all classes, and they also have a fairly high average HP stat, making them fairly tanky while also delivering some good attacking power, especially since they have a 1.0 times damage modifier, as you can see. Uh, in terms of the class triangle, they are strong against the Lancer class and weak against the Archer class, having that class triangle with the other two Knight classes. Star weight wise, they're above average. The typical star weight for a Saber class servant is around 100, so unless you pair it with an Archer or Rider, they're going to be gathering a good amount of crit stars. And they're going to be able to do that without the need of a craft essence or skill to help them out, though it certainly can hurt. Unfortunately, one of the weaknesses of the Saber class is one, there's a lot of gold sabers in general, and most of them fall into the unfortunate category of being AoE buster, meaning not a lot of variety in them. A lot of them are just, I've got a buster AoE Noble Phantasm, that's what I do. So it's sort of hard for those servants to stand out because there's just so many of them and all of them can be pretty effective. Deck wise, the typical Saber deck is a quick Arts Buster Buster deck, so they'll have a decent time generating Noble Phantasm, they'll have a decent time doing damage, but not going to generate a lot of quick stars. This is especially important as most Saber class servants have the passive Riding, which increases quick star effectiveness or quick card effectiveness, but they can't really use that. It's sort of just a wasted passive that originates from lore. There are a few exceptions. There are a few quick base servants, and we'll be getting to at least one of those on this list. Uh, with that out of the way, I think it's time we get to the honorable mentions. So there are 4 honorable mentions I felt were worth mentioning here, and those are Julius Caesar, Altera, Mordred, and the 4-star Nero Claudius. Julius Caesar is one of the few quick-based sabers that actually he provides a decent skill set to your team in boosting not only his performance but the party performance. First, he has charisma to boost the entire party's attacking stat. He also has tactics to boost the entire party's NP damage for the turn, and he has incitement, which will increase a target servant's critical strength at the cost of lowering their defense. However, in spite of his deck, he doesn't really generate a lot of crit stars just because his quick cards have a low amount of hits. And because he's quick based with low hits, gonna have a hard time increasing his Noble Phantasm gauge. In spite of this, he's still a solid 3-star servant. My vote for the best 3-star Lancer, and definitely someone worth investing in. Two AoE Buster servants make honorable mentions, being Altera and Mordred. Altera makes the list simply because she's the strongest. That's really plain and simple. She is the strongest of the AoE Buster servants, carrying an attack buff and a Noble Phantasm damage buff in 2 of her skills. Mordred stands out because she has a Mana Burst skill, increasing her Buster effectiveness, and has a skill to increase her Noble Phantasm charge, allowing her to Noble Phantasm more easily than pretty much any other AoE Buster servant. She also has a niche against Artoria enemies. Not really that useful outside of Camelot, but it is a niche that exists, and that should be taken into account. Regardless, they're both AoE. They're both the best AoE busters, but they are still AoE busters. But because they're powerful 5-stars, they do deserve the honorable mention. And then the last honorable mention is Nero Claudius, who has my vote for the 6th best Saber right now. She has a wide variety of powerful skills, starting with one of the best self buffs in the game, Imperial Privilege, which has a 60% chance to increase her attack and defense by 40%. In addition to this, she gets Invictus Spiritus, which grants Nero 3 guts. So you kill her, she comes back. You kill her, she comes back. You kill her, she comes back. Only Heracles has this kind of survivability, and he needs a craft essence to do it. This skill obviously gives Nero a great amount of survivability. In addition to this, she has Migraine to provide some additional healing and debuff resistance. Uh, what keeps her out of the top 5? One, her Noble Phantasms is AoE, and it's an Arts AoE, so not going to do as much damage. In addition, Imperial Privilege only has a 60% chance to proc, so it is a powerful skill, but unreliable skill. There are ways around this, but these inconsistencies keep Nero out of the top 5. That being said, who is number 5? That would be Rama. It is the Buster meme meta for Fate Grand Order, and Rama is the only Buster crit Saber among the 4 or 5-star Sabers. The only one. Even even in JP, there's only one other Buster crit Saber, and he's not released until over a year later. He's not even going to be released in 2019 for NA. Skills-wise, Rama's got a very strong uh, skill in Blessing of the Martial Arts, giving him a 100 critical damage boost for 1 turn while also increasing his crit star absorption. This is a fantastic skill and gives Rama a ton of burst damage. Unfortunately, the skill only lasts for 1 turn, but at max level, it's on a 4-turn cooldown. So every 4 turns, you can have that incredible burst. In addition to that, Rama also has Charisma, giving him some more sustained attacking power when Blessing of the Martial Arts is not active. In addition, this also gives him some utility as he can give the entire party a nice attack buff. That's not all Rama has, though. He packs a survival skill in Curse of Separation, granting him guts. Stat-wise, he's got above average HP for a 4-star. Um, Sabers in general tend to have higher than average HP, as I mentioned, and Rama's on the higher end. And attacking-wise, he's about average for attack-wise for a Saber, but he's still above average overall just because Sabers tend to have higher than average stats. There are some drawbacks, though. He's got a strong Noble Phantasm that deals extra damage to demonic enemies, but he doesn't have any form of Mana Burst or Noble Phantasm steroid to help his damage out. In addition to that, As mentioned, his critical strength buff only lasts one turn, so while he's not critting, he's not going to be doing as nearly as much damage. This isn't a huge deal, but it is something to take into account. Finally, last problem with Rama, can't really generate a lot of critical stars. He only has one quick card. Um, also, while he's a Buster Crit Servant, he's going to need some help generating those stars. Not that that's a huge problem. That's actually fairly easy at this point, but something to take into account. In spite of these flaws, though, he provides excellent burst damage and making him a very strong servant and more than worthy for the top 5. Number 4, we have the 5-star quick base Saber, Okita Soji. One note, if we are basing this list off of JP right now, Okita would probably take the number 1 spot. However, for right now, she's going to have to settle for number 4. What makes Okita so good? Uh, she's a quick base Saber, but she needs very little help to achieve her goals. She pretty much has everything she needs and doesn't need much outside assistance. She has multiple 5-hit quick cards, which let her generate a good amount of critical stars. Plus, because of her NP gain stat and these 5-hit quick cards, she has good Noble Phantasm gain in spite of only having the one arts card. So she's going to be able to use her Noble Phantasm multiple times in a battle. In addition, as mentioned, all Sabers get the passive riding. Okita, while having a fairly weak riding skill, is still one of the few Sabers that can actually benefit from it. Uh, active skill wise, first we have Shikuchi, I believe it's how it's pronounced, providing a very strong quick buff for one turn. And essentially, this is the Noble Phantasm steroid. I mentioned Rama was missing this. Okita has this, allowing her to do a very, very high amount of damage with her single target quick Noble Phantasm. In addition to this, Mind's Eye provides an evade as well as a 3-turn critical strength increase, allowing her to do some nice crit damage. Well, if you're going to do crit damage, you need to absorb stars. Weak Constitution helps with that, allowing her to absorb even more critical stars. Combined with her high attack stat, she does very good damage for her quick base servant. So why isn't she higher? Quick based. At this point in the metagame, quick is sort of a liability. Buster just does a ton more damage, and it's not really that hard to generate critical stars. She still does a good job in spite of her deck, but she will still be outclassed by most Buster class servants until about June 2020. That being said, still a fantastic servant to have, and will definitely be shooting up this list a year and a half from now. But in the meantime, Okita is going to have to settle for number 4. Number 3, we have Narrow Bride. We had a Buster and an quick base servant. Now we have an arts based servant. However, unlike Rama and Okita, Nero Bride isn't purely offensive and is more of an offensive support hybrid. She's got 3 fantastic targetable skills. Each one of them provides a very strong buff that she can use either on herself or to help a targeted ally. First, Stars of the Sky provides a 35 to 45% NP gain buff, helping fix certain servants' problems with charging their own Noble Phantasm. Next, she has Flowers of the Earth providing a 30 to 40% attack buff and a 30 to 50% buff to critical star drop rate. Just the attack buff is amazing, as it's equal to Imperial Privilege without the chance involved. But adding a critical star drop rate buff on top, that's just amazing. There isn't anybody else with this type of skill. Both of these skills are unique among Fate Grand Order servants. No one else has targetable skills that increase Noble Phantasm gain rate and attack. In addition to all this, she packs a heal in her third skill. Love for the people, giving a 1,000 to 3,000 point heal, as well as a 10 to 20% defense buff. So, three amazing targetable skills that can fit well on most teams. In addition to that, she's got a fairly strong single target Arts Noble Phantasm, but it also comes with a number of debuffs, decreasing the enemy's defense, critical star rate, and inflicting burn for 5 turns. Now, of course, you might be thinking, she has all of these good skills and a good Noble Phantasm. Why isn't she higher? First of all, she has all these amazing skills that can boost her allies or herself, but she can't really play both roles at once. She either has to focus on attacking or focus on helping her allies. She can't really do both. It's kind of hard for her. In addition to this, her skills have some fairly long cooldowns. Stars from the Sky has a fairly basic 765 cooldown, but her other two skills, those have cooldowns of 7 and 6 turns at max rank. So, not going to be able to spam her skills as much as other art servants. In addition to this, her Noble Phantasm, while arts based, only has 2 hits. So, it's going to have poor Noble Phantasm refund when compared to other art servants such as Vlad or Artoria Archer. In spite of these negatives, Nero Bright's still a fantastic art servant. Uh, Definitely consider her for any arts team you're building, whether you want to use her as your attacker or your support. She fills both roles rather nicely and more than worry for the number 3 spot. Now, who is number 2? Well, this might surprise some people. The number 2 Saber Servant, in my opinion, is the 4-star Saber Lancelot. Uh, as with Okita, Saber Lancelot has he's a he is extremely self-sufficient. He has everything you want in an offensive servant, all within his skills. First off, he's an arts-based servant, but he's a critical arts-based servant. So, what would a critical arts-based servant want? Well, first of all, he's got Knight of the Lake, giving him 10 to 20 critical stars, just straight critical stars, while increasing his Noble Phantasm gauge by 30%. We talk about Artoria's Instinct and how that is an awful skill. Well, attach an MP gauge increase to it and give it a good amount of critical stars, turns into a good skill. But these stars don't mean anything if you can't absorb him. So he has Eternal Arms Mastery, increasing his critical star gather rate by 3,000% at level 1. Lancelot will get all of the critical stars, period. The only reason to level the skill is to lower the cooldown. At level 1, he gets all of the stars. Finally, he's got a critical strength buff. Knight of Owner increases his critical strength 30 to 50% for 3 turns and gives him more critical stars, 5 to 15 depending on level, over the course of 3 turns. He generates its own stars, absorbs his stars, and increases its own critical strength. Extremely self-sufficient. Plus, since he is arts-based and he's going to be doing crits, he's going to be spamming his Noble Phantasm, and he's got a very powerful Arts Noble Phantasm. Gives a 30% Arts buff before it attacks, and does good damage. Seriously, Lancelot is one of the most self-sufficient servants in Fate Grand Order in terms of offense. He provides himself all of the buffs he needs. Unfortunately, he does not provide any sort of team support. He provides very little utility and has no defensive skills. If you're going to use him, you have to build entirely around him. Not that that's much of a problem with his damage output, as he just carves through enemies like butter, but it is something to take into account. Pair him with healing, taunts, evades, invincibility. You're all set. So why is he number 1? Well, he is a 4-star, so he's not going to have the stats of a 5-star servant. Second, he is arts-based. Arts isn't a problem, but it's not Buster. Buster is the superior card type right now. Regardless of all that, though, Lancelot, fantastic offensive servant, one of the best 4 stars in the game, certainly in the top 5, and my personal pick for the number 2 Saber class servant in Fate Grand Order right now. Who is that number 1 servant, though? That is our newest Saber servant, Miyamoto Musashi, a very strong Buster based servant. Full Buster based in this case. So let's start with what makes Musashi good. First of all, 11th highest attack amongst all servants in FGO right now, and 3rd highest among all sabers, just behind Okita and Altera. But she should outdamage both Okita and Altera, as Musashi has a full Buster deck, 3 Buster cards, and a Buster Noble Phantasm. In fact, she is the only 5-star Saber right now with a single target Buster Noble Phantasm, giving her the highest damage output among Sabers when it comes to Noble Phantasm damage. But you might be thinking, Musashi has 3 Buster cards. How is she going to charge that Noble Phantasm? Well, that is where her first and by far her most unique skill, Fifth Sequence, comes in. Now, this name will probably be changed for NA, but for right now, we'll be calling it Fifth Sequence. When you activate this skill, during the turn, all of Musashi's hit counts are doubled. Yes, doubled. Essentially, what it should read is double the effectiveness of all of your cards for 1 turn. Double your NP gain for your arts card. Double your crit star generation for your quick card. Uh, it is an absolute amazing skill and can charge well more than half of your Noble Phantasm gauge with an Arts Buster Quick Brave Chain. Heck, if you just crit on your Arts card, that's 75 to 80% Noble Phantasm right there. Very little help needed to get the rest of your Noble Phantasm up. It really is a fantastic skill, entirely unique to Musashi, um, and there's really not much more to say. It's a fantastic skill, and it's going to be extremely helpful while you're using her. Next, we have Heavenly Eyes, granting a 30% Buster buff and applies Ignore Invincible for 1 turn. This is your Noble Phantasm steroid, providing a strong Buster buff for Noble Phantasm and letting her pierce invincibility. So even if the opponent just use invincibility on themselves, Musashi's like, nope, don't care, I'm going to pierce that invincibility. On top of that, Musashi has an invincibility skill of her own in Emptiness, which also increases critical star drop rate for 3 turns and removes all debuffs. So what do all these skills lead to? A single target Buster Noble Phantasm that increases Noble Phantasm strength with overcharge and removes all buffs from the enemy. So you pierce your enemy's invincibility with your Noble Phantasm, and then you remove said invincibility, so all following attacks, even from other servants, they're going to go right through. That being said, Musashi is fairly straightforward. Like most servants on this list, not a lot of utility. Does very little to help the rest of your team. In addition, most of her skills only last 1 turn. The only effect that doesn't last 1 turn is the crit star drop rate from Emptiness. In addition, you're going to have to time her skills correctly, particularly Fifth Sequence, which it will be best to use when her Arts card comes up. That way you can get that very good Noble Phantasm gain. In addition, when Fifth Sequence isn't up, Musashi's Noble Phantasm gain isn't that great, so she is going to need help in that regard. Outside of that, though, not really much negative to say. Musashi's a powerhouse. In my opinion, she's currently the best Saber within Fate Grand Order NA right now. She isn't perfect, but she will bust through servants with ease, leaving no bodies left to be found. That's it for my top 5 Sabers in Fate Grand Order video. If you liked the video and would like to see more, Please click the like button and consider subscribing. Disagree with my rankings? Please feel free to comment below explaining why. I am very happy to have more discussions about Fate Grand Order. If you want like to follow me on social media, I'll have a link to my Twitter account in the description. Thank you all for watching and have yourself an awesome day.